With a million podcasts out there, we're grateful you chose Toilets to Titles. We give fantasy football advice to get your crop team to the finals. From Nate's cousin Eddie Persona and his unapologetic love for Chubb, and Justin's hatred for Chris Ballard, our show is as good as a belly rub. Mark is the best of the NFC West, putting down pen and Pete with his love for the Rams. Grab a whiskey or a beer, we're glad you're here. Welcome to the family, we're clan for gibberish and rambling. We have recent news and games of the week. We talk PPR and weekly streams. Start 'em, sit 'em, keep 'em, quit 'em. Hit the like and sub buttons for the fellas. Got any suggestions, just tell us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Toilets and Titles. My name is Justin Stevens, and we're back with episode 259, zeroing in on episode 300 soon enough. Yeah, Mark, my man, what was that music?
Ooh, it just sounded like a regular pop song to me, to be honest.
Yeah, it was listed as an indie song.
Yeah, I could see that.
You can kind of see it, yeah. Little, maybe girl band indie or something like that. Not bad though. Wasn't a horrible song, I guess. Definitely not what you would hear on a fantasy football show, but we're not normal around here. Also, might have to consider changing up the lyrics a little bit for that, since we no longer have start 'em and sit 'em and the keep 'em and quit 'em and all that. That was in-season stuff, guys. We've moved on to our what we would call off-season for fantasy football. We're zeroing in on the playoffs today, so that's going to be nice. We do have some fantasy football stuff to wrap up a little bit today, but for the most part, today's show is going to be about the NFL playoffs, and really looking forward to that. Rich, my man, what's up? Actually, just got done typing your name, Rich. We next week's episode, for those of you that want to tune in next week, will be our bathroom board bet episode, where I reveal the results of how we finished on our Toilets to Titles staff bathroom board bets. So just to run it down for you real quick, over the last 4 years, there's only been two winners, myself and Coach. I won 2 and he won 2. But so far from what I'm seeing this year, I've got some competition with Coach stepping down. A lot of other people stepped up and made a lot of board bets. So I've got some stiff competition this time around. So it'll be fun.
Quick preview. How many board bets did we have this year?
I don't have the tally. I don't have the tally done yet. But I can tell you how many pages we have. 1, 2, 3, about 3.5 pages full, and there are 7 pages total on the doc, and that's counting all 5 years of Toilets to Titles. So that definitely more board bets this year than ever before. That's for sure. A lot of them came from the Sunday morning Title Time Start Sit show, as you can imagine. And then a few, obviously, right here on the flagship show as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode for sure. But I don't want to discount this episode. This is big time stuff. This is NFL playoffs, especially big time stuff for my man Nate, and of course you, Mark, with your Rams and your Packers in the playoffs. You know what? Before we get to my bad, let's go ahead and talk about your good. Let's sum up the Rams season, the way it's been so far, and how you see them moving forward into the playoffs, like as far as their chances.
So, yeah, it was definitely a roller coaster of a season. It started off looking pretty bad, but, we had a lot of injuries that first game against Detroit. We took them to overtime, and the offensive line just got brutalized early in the season, and we definitely paid for it. Started off 1-4, and then we ended the season on a 8 or 9 game winning streak, I think. So, yeah, I mean, I like our chances. I've said this all season. When healthy, I don't think there's a team we can't match up with against offensively. Our defense isn't the greatest, but we have a lot of young kids stepping up and getting better as the season goes on. And the one thing I love about our defense is they're opportunistic. So they're always going for that big turnover when the game matters. So I like our chances. We got matched up with Minnesota. We beat Minnesota once already. I know we're both different teams from when we played earlier, but I like our chances this week.
I like when Dan Campbell beat the Vikings and he shook the hand of the coach and he said, "We'll see you in a couple weeks." He was already calling them to win. That's a division opponent. Now, maybe he was just trying to show him a little bit of extra respect, and that sort of stuff.
And that might have been it. But I mean, that video is being shown in the Rams locker room.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. whatever it takes. Bulletin board material has definitely had a history of creeping its way into the NFL for sure. Nate's not here to talk about his Packers, but yeah, his Packers also a bit of an up and down season. They had injury issues. I was going to say too with the Rams, if the Rams do happen to go on and play the Lions at any point in the playoffs, then based off of the way the teams were at the beginning of the year and the way they ended the end of the season, that game very likely could be an over-under of 150 points. That's going to be an incredible game to watch. That might be something that you're going to be talking about later on with your the fantasy football playoff strategies. Let's see. I got Rams winning when you played the Bills and hung up 40. Yeah. Rams can be that absolutely. And you said it a few weeks ago, and I mean I agreed with you. I think Nate agreed with you as well. Like the Rams at a certain point in the season, and it wasn't very deep into the season when they started getting healthy and they got their receivers back and they started to look like the Rams of old. There was a point where it was like, you know what, there's not a team in the NFL that wants to face this team in the playoffs. And because of the win-loss records at the time, there was a chance that maybe they still don't make the playoffs. I know you always believed, but there was a chance mathematically that maybe they don't make it. There were NFL teams out there really hoping for Rams losses at the end of the season. That's for sure. But my thing is the Colts, and I'm going to save my rant for here in a little bit when we get to that in the news. But there was a recent firing also today that I didn't. Oh, it looks like you added it. Never mind. I was Antonio Pierce. That happened after I added the news here. But you know what? We'll go ahead and talk about Antonio Pierce. That's the most recent of the news that we have on here. Fired today. Raiders. Rich, if you're still in the house, tell us how you feel about it as the resident Raiders fan. But I mean, he had a prove-it year here as the interim head coach that became the head coach. And I don't know, it was kind of a weird situation. I always viewed him every week as thinking he's not the permanent forever guy, but it looked like he was doing a decent enough job with the crap that he had on the field that I thought he was always going to be the permanent forever guy. And then today I found out I'm wrong, but I don't know. Just 4 wins this season. Is that, I mean, if it's anybody other than the Raiders, maybe he gets a chance. I don't know. I felt like he deserved a chance. I thought that with the guys that they gave him on the field and the fact that all the players loved him, I kind of felt like Dan Campbell had a bad first year, and look what, like, sometimes you got to give these guys a chance, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that last comment right there, you hit it on the head. He's your locker room guy. That's why they made him the head coach. The locker room loves him. They love to play for him. But at the same time, like, you got to have more than that. And I think the reason he got fired, which I do think it was a little weird because what they call it, Black Monday or whatever it is, that Monday when the coaches usually get fired, they let him go do a press conference, which I thought was weird. Like, that made me think, maybe they're going to keep him the job. But the reason he lost his job, and the reason, at least I think is the reason why he lost his job, is because going into the season, he had 2 quarterbacks and he had to make a decision. And he chose Gardner Minshew over Aiden O'Connell. And that was clearly the wrong decision. Rich was saying before the season started, it should be Aiden O'Connell, and he was right. It should have been Aiden O'Connell. I'm not saying Aiden O'Connell is going to be a great quarterback in this league, but he's a lot better than Gardner Minshew is. And that played itself out this season, and that's what I think ultimately cost him his job.
Yeah. Well, we'll go down the list and just talk coaches firing. We'll go in Jacksonville next. Doug Peterson, after 3 seasons. As a Colts fan, I'm happy to see this because I don't think that all the woes in Jacksonville were because of Doug Peterson. He's got a long track record. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. He has a good history. That defense was horrible practically all season, pretty much his entire career in Jacksonville. They never gave him a defense. We've seen that Trevor Lawrence hasn't quite become what everybody thought he was going to be. Trevor Lawrence has the potential to be a low-level Eli Manning sort of player, like nothing great, but decent enough to win games if you have a team around him. And I feel like Doug Peterson was not the problem there, but as a Colts fan, I like to see guys that aren't the problem getting fired on divisional opponents' staff. So do you agree with me on that, or do you think Doug Peterson deserved to go?
I think he deserved to go. I think he's a moron now. I get he's a Super Bowl winning coach, but like listening to him in press conferences and watching the decision he made throughout his tenure at Jacksonville was just awful. When they were, I think the record, I don't know, they had 1 win, maybe 1-5 or something like that, whatever they were to start the season. And somebody asked him about like job security, and he looked at him like he was crazy for asking the question. Dude, you're what is he, 3 years in at Jacksonville now? And
yeah, it was his 3rd year. Yeah.
And he hasn't been able to produce anything with what they believe they drafted was a franchise superstar quarterback. And he hasn't been able to get that out of him. I don't know. Like you say, Trevor can be a low level Eli Manning. I don't know. I think from what I saw in college, like he has the talent to be more. I just think he needs to find somebody who can get it out of him, because whatever he's had in Jacksonville clearly isn't working. He's not half He's not half the quarterback he was in college. And I mean, we see things like with Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield and like how certain coaches can turn them around. I think if we can get somebody for Trevor like that, then he has the ability to be great, not just good, but great. But Doug's not the guy who's going to do it. And that's why I think he needed to go, because Jacksonville doesn't have the luxury of moving on from Trevor Lawrence. They need Trevor Lawrence to be Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on how coaches can bring out the best of other players. So you might be onto something there. Like, even if Doug Peterson isn't necessarily a bad coach, he's not changing up his system to fit whatever it is that fits best for Trevor Lawrence. And a good coach would definitely change their system for a quarterback, just as you said, as we've seen with Darnold and Mayfield. And we've also seen other quarterbacks like Brock Purdy and Tom Brady, who haven't necessarily didn't light it up in college, but then they're perfectly great players in the NFL because the coaches change the system to fit their quarterback's needs. So you're absolutely onto it there. And Kenny OU believes that they should have kept Pierce. I agree with that. Rich says there are plenty of coaches that will go to the Raiders. That hat will go to the Raiders. I like AP, but he got fired. He got himself fired. Yep. I mean, that's fair. That's fair. All right. So then we've got who else got fired? Well, let's see. The Seahawks. What's that?
I was just going to say, I was throwing one out there. Jared Mayo.
Yep, Jared Mayo fired as the Patriots head coach after just 1 season. That one was kind of a shocker, at least for me anyway. I didn't see that one coming. I thought, 4 wins. Isn't that right? I think that's what the Patriots had, was 4 wins in the 1 season and under Jared Mayo. And Robert Kraft says because he felt like the team took a step back. I don't know that I agree with that. I feel like they were trying to find their identity. I feel like they had some great plays from some good players. I feel like they started to hit a bit of a stride there at a certain point in the season. And again, this is another one of those where and as a Colts fan, I hated to see that Jared Mayo could potentially be a decent coach because he was such a great player against us for all those years. I legitimately think that he's got a shot at being a decent coach. He just needs to find a team willing to really give him an actual shot. And maybe that was the whole plan all along. Maybe Kraft has somebody in mind and he wanted to give Mayo an opportunity. But I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But I haven't heard any news of any new hirings. You'd think if he had somebody in mind, that would have already happened. But I think that Mayo goes on and finds another home and he does just fine. It definitely as a coordinator, if not a head coach.
Yeah, so I think the Patriots are going to end up with Vrabel if I had to take a guess. But I'm going to throw this out there again. I'm going to say I said it earlier. I guess I'm going to be saying this a lot today. Robert Kraft is a moron. He's one of those guys who thinks like he's got some special gift. No, you don't have a special gift. You were gifted the greatest coach in the history of the NFL and the greatest quarterback in the NFL. The Patriots never even then. I like Peyton Manning, so I see that argument. But regardless, they never even had to sign a free agent to that team. All the players came to them and took discounts. They never had to pay anybody. They got them for free. And then Robert Kraft's going to take a trip to Israel with Jared Mayo and like him so much that he thinks he sees the magic in him, that he writes it into his contract that he's going to be the next coach after Bill Belichick's gone just so he doesn't lose him. And then what happens? He sees he wasn't ready. He was thrown into a horrible position, and Robert Kraft immediately regretted what he did. But I just think Mayo was put in a lose-lose situation, especially after the first week when you beat the Bengals, because the optimism is so high, right? Like after you beat the Bengals, right. Oh my God, look where we're going. And then you realize that you're still not that great of a team. Like they need a lot of help on that team. He should have definitely got more than 1 year, but I think a part of the problem was that not Robert Kraft didn't see anything, but the rest of the organization was seeing that he wasn't ready to be a head coach. And if they would have kept him along and let him learn a little more under somebody else, I think he would have been a great coach down the road. I just think he was thrown into the spot too early.
Yeah, so Kenny Hughes still talking about the Raiders here, saying that they shot themselves in the foot. What are they going to do about quarterback? But here's the thing, because the next comment he says that Sanders and Ward are going to be gone. I'm not so sure they're going to be gone. Like if you listen to Deion Sanders talking about his kid, there's a really good chance that they will not allow Shedeur to play for anybody else other than the Raiders, from the sounds of it, or a few other choice teams that Deion wants him to go to. Like, in other words, if we get to the draft and the Giants draft him, he's already said, my son's not going to be a Giant. My son's not going to go play for the Giants. So, I mean, the Browns, like, do the Browns have the second pick? Maybe the Browns take Shedeur Sanders, and if so, is Deion going to allow that? We might have another Eli Manning situation where dad steps in and says, you can trade him. You can trade him now. He's not going to show up to camp. He's not going to play for you until he lands in the spot that he wants. And the Raiders is one of those spots that Deion has stated he wouldn't mind seeing his son play. So I think there's a good chance that no matter what, he ends up going there. It's just a matter of whether or not the Raiders have to give up anything for him. So, I mean, there's that. 4-13, Kraft set him up for failure. Pretty much just what you were saying. Yeah, absolutely. See, if Patriots don't spend anything in free agency, may win. Yeah, there's a good chance. Yeah,
that's what I'm talking.
Like Angela.
Now they have to try to go lure players to come and play for them. All these players don't want to come to New England now. Yeah. So do you have that? Yeah. Do you have that persuasion? I don't know if they do.
Seahawks fire offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb after just one season. And there might be something to this because before that, Shane Waldron was there for the previous 2 years. He actually kind of had Geno Smith looking like a different quarterback. And now Ryan Grubb kind of has Geno Smith looking like Geno Smith. And I know Geno's already stated he's coming back next year. He'll be a Seahawk again next year. Maybe they get a different offensive coordinator that can shake things up. But that offense looked stagnant this year compared to what it has been in years past. I'm not saying it's all on Ryan Grubb, but I am saying with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett is a shell of himself now, but he's the wide receiver 3 there behind Jackson Smith and Jigba. You got Walker and Sharps there in the backfield. That offense is just too good to get what we got out of it. I can actually kind of see this firing.
Yeah, I agree. But the offensive coordinator is always the parachute for the head coach, right? They don't want to get rid of the head coach quite yet, so they cut the parachute and here's your last chance. Don't fall.
Right. Lou Anarumo, defensive coordinator for the last 6 years for the Cincinnati Bengals, was fired. This one was surprising to me. And I get it. The Bengals defense was horrible. But did you see what they did in the offseason to that Bengals defense? He was the defensive coordinator there for 6 years for a reason, because for the first 5 years, they were overperforming expectations. And they got rid of the entire secondary and free agency. They lost a couple players early to injury. They didn't try to pick up anybody. They didn't draft hardly anything for that defense. They pretty much gave this guy a table of scraps and said, here, this is like the TV show Chopped. We want you to make something out of it. And he wasn't able to. There's a reason 6 years, even 5 years is a long time for a defensive coordinator to be able to keep his job in the NFL. We're talking about it now. All these coaches, even head coaches, that are losing their jobs after 1 or 2 seasons. So he is a good defensive coordinator. The reason I'm so animated about this one is because the Colts fired defensive coordinator Gus Bradley after 3 seasons. Gus Bradley actually wasn't good or even that good at all, really. That defense was horrible under Gus Bradley. And even before Gus Bradley came to us, he had seasons where he had teams where they had overperformed a little bit of expectation. But for the most part, it's always been pretty mediocre at best with Gus Bradley. But Gus Bradley wasn't the problem here. There's a guy that hired Gus Bradley. There's a guy that's hired the entire coaching staff, and none of these coaches have wanted to come in and win since this guy came in and hired all these guys, and that is Chris Ballard. Ballard is the problem. Ballard is the issue. Ballard needs to go, and he's hired all these coaches. He's gotten all this talent, and we've not done anything with it. Right now, we're other than the team, there's like 1 or 2 teams that haven't made the playoffs in like a decade. Outside of those, we are the next longest running team without making the playoffs. This is now our 5th year in a row. It's all under Chris Ballard. And for whatever reason, Irsay comes out and says that Ballard and Steichen will remain on for next season, promising us yet another mediocre season next year where we're going to get more wins than we need to have a good draft pick and not enough wins to actually make the playoffs. Ballard is the issue here. But if you're going to fire Gus Bradley, and we now have Lou Amarola, I'm talking NASCAR guys here. Lou Anarumo. If you're going to fire him over in Cincinnati, go get him. Bring him to Indianapolis because he is a really good defensive coordinator. I don't understand why he got fired in Cincinnati. He's not ever been the issue for why they've lost in the years past. It's usually been due to injuries on the offensive side, if anything. But here we are. So that's my thing on the Colts. Irsay needs to go ahead and hang it up, hand the team over to his daughters, call it an incredible career, Hall of Fame career at that. Even with just the one Super Bowl that you brought in because you choked away so many seasons with Peyton Manning, we still believe that it's a Hall of Fame career. You've done great things in the community, but you don't know football anymore. It's time to bring in a GM that wants to actually win rather than make relationships last with people in the NFL. It's not about relationships, homie. This is the NFL. This isn't Pop Warner football. So yeah, let's get rid of Ballard. Irsay, hang it up, and let's find some coaches that want to win. that's the end of my rant there for the Colts. But I saw a grimace on your face for a little bit there. I think you want to talk about at least one of these defensive coordinators.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say you have zero prayer of a chance of having Jim Irsay walk away. That's just not happening.
And I don't want the guy to die either, because I do love the guy to death.
No.
As a person, love him to death.
Yeah.
So hopefully he lives for another 15 years. I just like to see him, give the team up. But you're right, that's not going to happen.
So the only thing I was going to say about the defensive coordinator is after last season, something had to change, right? And their defense was god awful. I get everything you're saying; it makes complete sense. But it's either the defensive coordinator or the GM. And are you going to fire the guy who brought in Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and now superstar Chase Brown? No, you're not getting rid of that guy. That guy earned a lifetime job in Cincinnati. So
it's too bad he can't bring in any defensive stars.
Yeah, right? He should, but I'm just saying I get it. I understand why they fired him.
Right. Let's see. What else do we got here? As far as coaches go, it looks like Giants are retaining head coach Brian Daboll and GM Joe Schoen for a fourth season. 1832-1 over the first three seasons with these two guys. The first season was 9-7-1 with a playoff berth, which was a big deal for the Giants organizations. At that time, they hadn't been in the playoffs for quite some time, so it was a huge deal. And that bought him a second season pretty easily at 5-12. But 5-12, that in that season, we had some injuries. We had the whole Saquon injury issue where he sprained his ankle like 4 times in one season. And then, they were still only a few games back of where they had finished the previous year. If I remember right, Daniel Jones had an injury that season. They didn't really have any wide receiver help. So then that bought you this third year. In my mind, it bought them a third and final year if they made it all the way through the season. Well, they finished 4-13. They did finally get some wide receiver help for Daniel Jones, and obviously that didn't work out. They wind up cutting Daniel Jones. He's a backup for Minnesota now. So they end the season at 4-13 without a quarterback, because let's face it, they still don't have a quarterback. They've got 4 non-quarterbacks at that position now, but they've got Malik Neighbors, who's still tearing it up. Any level of a quarterback is going to make him an insane superstar, because he's already a superstar right now after just his rookie year. So you've got that going for you, but you have these same guys coaching him next year now. Like, you still have the same GM. The GM brought in, that was a draft pick though, and that was a draft pick that kind of fell to him in Malik Neighbors. So to say that he's some amazing mastermind GM, it's kind of a stretch there, because just about anybody should have drafted Malik Neighbors at that position. So I don't know. I think this one's kind of crazy to me. I think now you have this young, talented superstar player. You're only a quarterback away, and you're in a draft position now where you can get said quarterback. I think now's the time to start fresh all over. They should have cleaned house, in my opinion, and drafted the quarterback that they wanted, that their new coach wanted, and go from there, because now these guys are going to draft the new quarterback. And then if it doesn't work out next year, you're firing them, and the next GM and coach have to deal with whatever quarterback these guys draft for your squad. I don't know. It just seems silly to me not to go ahead and move on. Am I missing something here?
No, and I think the craziest thing about it is Giants fans, for the most part, are happy they're keeping them. At least Daboll. I'm pretty sure most of them want the GM gone, but they're all happy that they're keeping Daboll. My thing is, like, so he was such a great coach the first season or whatever because of what he did with Daniel Jones, right?
Yeah.
And then now, why he's not a good coach, Daniel Jones is the excuse for that. So, like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have the reason you're a good coach is because of what you did with Daniel Jones, and then he falls apart completely, and he's the reason why your team's bad. Like, you're not a good coach. I don't think he's a good coach.
What really happened was this first year was a year that we had relatively healthy Saquon Barkley. And then after that, you didn't. or you didn't have Saquon at all. And I think that's what really happened. And so like maybe Saquon next year can play for the Eagles and coach the Giants.
Well,
Maybe.
And as bad as Daniel Jones is as a quarterback, the success they had in that first season, they let him run like crazy in that season.
Yeah.
They stopped running him. That's
Yep.
the only thing he could do well, and they stopped letting him run. That's a coaching problem.
Yep. And other coaching news, the Bears have requested permission to interview Mike McCarthy. I mean, last I heard, Mike McCarthy wasn't going anywhere.
And Dallas denied.
Yeah, did they deny the permission?
They denied the permission. They have
Gotcha.
exclusive window until whenever his contract's up or whatever. But
yeah, that's hilarious to me. Like, and why doesn't Jerry Jones want to just go ahead and move on from him? If there's other people interested, as a matter of fact, if they're that interested that they're requesting permission now, get a draft pick out of them. Just be like, you know what? For a 6th round draft pick, you can interview him, and if you end up hiring him, we'll make it a 4th.
And if we want to talk about hilarious things, can we talk about the list of coaches that the Jets want to interview? It's the who's who of everybody that coached in the past 15 years. Like, we're talking Ron Rivera, Rex Ryan, Matt Nagy, Arthur Smith, like all these nobodies. And like,
now Rex Ryan isn't a nobody. He's just
Rex.
An old head. He's just an old head.
Out of there for how long?
Right. So even with that long list, they still didn't mention Bill Belichick.
No, they didn't. But talk about a dysfunctional organization. Did you hear that the other day, the owner actually had to come out and deny that his 11-year-old son was helping him make personnel decisions? Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't.
So a report came out about like 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe a little longer, that the Jets had a trade package for Jerry Jeudy. And his son was in the room when they were talking about the trade. And his son told them that Jeudy was trash because his Madden rating wasn't high enough. So they nixed the trade.
Wow.
And that stuck for those 2 or 3 weeks, where the owner actually had to come out in his press conference and say that was I forget what he said. I forget what he said, but he basically said he didn't do it.
Hey, if this happens, are you officially going to be a Raider hater?
Yes, I will hate Penguin Pete until the day that I die. Cannot stand.
Hey, you know what? I agree. I've never been a fan of Pete Carroll either. But you know what? If he comes back to coach again at 97 years old, you got to hand it to him.
Yeah, I guess. Whatever.
Let's see what else we got. With the Titans, GM Rand Carthon has been fired after 2 seasons. I guess they blame him, even though he's had a pretty good run with draft picks. Like people want to give him crap for trading up a little bit to get Will Levis. That was still 2nd round. Like, it wasn't like it was a huge trade up either. He didn't give up much on that trade up, and that was after all the other quarterbacks were gone. I think Will Levis is actually a decent quarterback for them to have in this situation because it's easy for them to move on because it was a 2nd round pick. Like, the fact that it didn't work out, they can easily move on to another quarterback situation now. And as a matter of fact, they have the 1st overall pick now, so they really should, Cam Ward, if you're listening, that sort of thing. They should look ahead at the next quarterback, especially since they let Malik Willis go as what clearly seems to be a solid backup quarterback that could have been a good starter for them. I think it's the team around him more than anything that made Will Levis look as bad as he did, but Will Levis certainly didn't help his cause. Levis will be lucky to be a backup after what we saw on the field from him. But yeah, I'm not so sure that Rand Carthon is the issue here. But you know what I do like about the Titans is this shows a team that's at least willing to do something. They want to win. Like they shake things up. They traded away Hopkins. They traded to get Ridley. They made so many moves in the offseason to build their team to totally change that offense around to go from another scheme because they knew they were losing Derrick Henry. So they went from a total rush team to an almost strictly passing team over one offseason. They're doing whatever it takes to try to win, even though they're bad at it. They're just a bad organization. At least they're trying. So kudos to you guys.
Doing something is not always the greatest thing because I'll tell you what, getting rid of Vrabel was a horrible mistake.
Yeah, I agree. But not doing anything makes you mediocre forever.
Yeah. But I mean, you had a coach who was ready to what was he going to get rid of a ball if he won a Super Bowl? One of his testicles? Or I mean, that's dedication, right?
Yeah, I vaguely remember the story, but I mean, yeah. Let's see. On the coaching end, I think that's it. We got Zeke Elliott signed with the Chargers, so he's going to be a backup for the Chargers now. Pretty much that was hey, I'm getting old. I don't know how many more miles I have left, and I want at least a shot at a Super Bowl, so cut me, and then a playoff team picked him up. That's pretty much all that was. Maybe he gets some run in goal line situations. I don't know. Christian Watson, wish Nate was here. He tore his ACL in Week 18, so he's going to miss some serious time, probably deep into next season. So that's sad to see. Super fast guy. You hate to see that happen with a young player this early in his career. And
He's
then what's that?
He's glass, though. I feel like every time he gets hit, he gets hurt.
Yeah, I don't think it really affects the Packers so much in the playoffs. He probably is overall the best wide receiver that they have as far as overall skill set goes. But they have so many other guys that can fill in at different spots and different skill sets that, I mean, it is what it is. You're going to see Nick step up, and you're going to see a few plays made from Kraft out of the flats. And I mean, yeah, they'll all pick up the slack there. I'm not too worried about that, but I also don't really like their odds in the playoffs this year with or without Watson. Speaking of Watsons, we also have Deshaun, the human predator Watson. The team stated that he had a setback with his Achilles, and it's too early to tell if he's going to play in 2025. This is all a way for them to hide the fact that they don't want to play him in 2025, and they are acknowledging the fact that they are the worst organization in the history of the NFL for even signing the bastard to a contract. So unless you want to add to that, the last bit of news here we have is for one of your players. So I'll let you talk about that.
It's my boy. I'm very sad. Blake Corum fractured his forearm in the final game of the season. You know, I was very excited. They're resting all the starters. He was finally going to get some work, and very early in the game, fractured his forearm. Out for the playoffs. I mean,
yeah,
he was getting a carry here or there. He wasn't doing a lot during the regular season, but I mean, that's still my guy from Michigan. Loved him. Loved watching him. Hate to see it. Hope he comes back strong.
Yeah, it is just a forearm, so I'm sure he will be good for next season. But there were actually a few fantasy championships out there in Week 18 because some of your commissioners hate you, and of course we do it in Frankenstink too. But that's kind of a different element. You expect to have weird, crazy stuff happen in Frank, but some leagues are just because your commissioner really doesn't like the people in their league, and so there may have been some Blake Corum run out there for championship week. So one of those things that might leave a bad taste in your mouth, but it's not Corum's fault.
So very quick fantasy history story right here. My very first fantasy league that I was in way back in the day was a touchdown only league. Commissioner had the championship in the final week of the season, but he also made a rule where you're only allowed to make one pickup during the playoffs from the waiver wire.
Oh, wow.
So one year it was actually a split team. Me and my buddy split the team. And one year we had the most dominant team throughout the whole season. And we got to the championship and all our starters were resting. And we had to waste our one pickup in the first week of the playoffs because our kicker got hurt. So we had to use it on a kicker. So we got
touchdown only league.
Yeah, the touchdown only league, but they had kickers in it too, right? That made a lot of sense. His
I
justification.
guess that would help with
kicker
like
was
tiebreakers.
points. Yeah, kicker was points. It was more, I guess, a points only league. But
I'm very pro kicker, but that's the only situation I could see where it would be dumb to have a kicker.
But yeah, so we got to the championship, had 4 of our starters resting. We had to take zeros in spots because it was against the rules to pick up players on the waiver wire. We left after that year.
Yeah, I bet. Here's a good one for you. Rich says that his very first league, he had to drive 45 minutes once a week to submit his lineup at a casino. So,
Rich.
kudos to you, Rich. Also,
That's
you know,
right there, though, right? Dedication.
He also had to walk 4 miles uphill in the snow both ways to get to school every day. We love you, Rich. All right, let's see. That's it for the news. We got patreon.com/toylessandtitles. Reach out there, become a Patreon supporter. We got a price tag for every budget, and we really appreciate all the Patreons out there. I'm about to start sending out some random gifts and prizes to some of the Patreons here in a little while, in the next few weeks. But looking forward to that, just as a random thank you. So we appreciate your support. Patreon.com/toylessandtitles. Game of the week was a competition that the 3 of us, you and I and Nate, did all season, where we chose a game that we thought was going to be our game of the week. And the point differential of that game went towards our total season. We wanted to try to find the games where it had the closest point differential because the lowest score wins at the end of the season. Week 18 went exactly how the whole rest of the season pretty much has gone. I finished in last place in not week 18. Week 17 was the last week that I counted this because we didn't write down our game of the week for week 18. But week 17, I had the Chiefs and the Steelers. There was a 19-point differential, which was par for the course for me because I ended with a total of 210 in last place. You finished in second in week 17 with the Broncos and Bengals, 16-point differential. You finished in second on the season with 163, and Nate beat us 133. So he beat me by 77 points. But he went with the Packers and the Vikings in week 17. It was only a 2-point differential there. So that was a fun game that we may have to find something different to replace it next season because that was embarrassing.
Well, not that it mattered, but now I'm realizing that any of the contests that we played, I'm going to have to spot check you because the Broncos and Bengals was a 6-point difference. It was 24-30. It wasn't 16.
Oh, so maybe I had a typo there or whatever.
10 points to my score that weren't justified. But like I said, it didn't matter. I still finished behind Nate.
So you saying you should have been – okay, so I had you down for 130 the week before.
And then how did I get to 63?
No. Never mind, because we didn't update we didn't add a whole new sheet for week 17. We just changed week 16s into week 17. That's what the problem was. So, yeah, so that was 2 total weeks added there. But anyway, at least we know first, second, and third is right because it was far enough off that 10 points wasn't going to make a difference.
I just had to bring in a little suspicion, any contest that I lose, that there might be some little,
Okay. Well, just so you know, if that's the case, then I'm a really bad cheater because not only did I get last, I got last by like 50 points to second place. All right, let's see. The next segment for today is going to be the playoffs. We're going to talk about the NFL playoffs and give our predictions for the playoffs. Nate is not with us, so hopefully he can fill in his predictions for the playoffs before they start. What were you going to say?
I was going to say we don't have to track it, but let's keep it going for the playoffs. What's your game of the week for the playoffs? Let's just pick a game that we like. that we think is going to be the best
game? Okay. Honestly, I'm gonna let you have your Rams and Vikings because I do think that's going to be an incredible game. But I think that the Broncos are going to give the Bills a run for their money. I do think that the Bills pull it out, but I think that's going to be a much closer game than a lot of people think. The Broncos defense is much, much better than people want to give them credit for. They've held down their opponents on points for all season, even the good opponents. They've kept it super tight with the Chiefs both times they've played each other. When they've played the higher end teams in the league, they've lost a lot of those games, but it's been close. I think they keep it close with the Bills. I think it's going to be a good, close, fun game to watch.
I like that game a lot. I will go with the Rams, but I'll also say that a sneaky game is going to be the Bucs and the Commanders. I think both defenses are pretty bad, and there's going to be points galore in that game.
Yeah, I could see that too. And the Rams and Vikings game is going to be fun. And honestly, like I'm seeing that the Vikings are getting a lot of love for that. But just like we've been saying, the Rams are playing their best football right now. The Vikings aren't so much. They're not playing as well as they were at the start of the season. And I truly 100% believe that the Rams are going to win that game straight out. Like I picked them here in our predictions that we're about to go over. Like I legitimately believe that. It's not just rooting for a team for whatever reasons, and it's not just because you're a Rams fan. Like I truly believe, based off of what we've been seeing on the field, that that's going to happen. So, but I do think it's going to be a good game.
The scary thing for Minnesota that they have to figure out quick is Detroit gave a blueprint to how to mess up Sam Darnold. Just get him out of the pocket, like.
Yeah, and with the way the Vikings offensive line has been, that's not that difficult. All right, so our predictions for the wild card round. In the AFC, Chiefs have a bye, but the Bills are playing the Broncos. That's the 2 seed versus the 7. The 3 seed Ravens are playing the 6 seed Steelers, so that's a divisional game. And then the 4 seed Texans are up against the 5 seed Chargers. Do you remember back in the day when they would not let divisional opponents play each other in the first round?
I thought I was crazy for thinking that because I had that in the back of my mind. But, yeah.
It's been like over a decade now since they've allowed it again. But there was a time back in the day, and what they would do in that situation, well, back then there were only 6 seeds. So the Steelers would just automatically get the 5 seed, and the Chargers would automatically get the 6 just because – the Steelers and Ravens are in the same division. So could you imagine the Chargers having one more win than the Steelers, but being 1 seed less?
Yeah, right.
So glad they changed that up. But anyhow, I've got the Chiefs winning that one. The Chiefs are on the bye. I've got the Chiefs in the second round playing the Chargers because I do think that the Chargers are going to beat the Texans. The Texans they have one less win than the Chargers, but a lot of their wins are against that really weak AFC South. And they didn't have very impressive wins throughout the season either. They just kind of fall into this 4 seed because they happen to be the winners of the worst division. So I do think that the Chargers are going to win that match, and they're going to go on to face the Chiefs. I've got the Ravens beating the Steelers, and I think they're going to handle business pretty handedly in that one too. I think that might even be a 2-score win for the Ravens, even though the Steelers' defense is really good. And then the Bills and the Broncos, like I said, I think that the Broncos give them a run for their money, but I do have the Bills winning in a close, tight matchup in the AFC. Then in the NFC, I've got you got the Lions with the bye week. I think they're going to face the Rams in round 2 in the divisional round because I've got the Rams. I've got all of the higher seeds winning this one. I don't have any of the wild card teams winning. I've got all the divisional champs winning. So I've got the Rams beating the Vikings. I've got the Buccaneers beating the Commanders, which was the only one I was really battling with. I really wanted to go with the Commanders, but at the end of the day, I like the grit of Baker Mayfield, and I like the grit of this team. And I mean, to get 10 wins with the team that they had, and I get a lot of those wins. They're almost like the Texans. They're in the NFC South, where it's a pretty bad division, and they got a lot of the wins that way. But I think that they can keep this game close enough, and being at home, they might be able to pull that one out. And some of that is just wishful thinking. And then the Eagles over the Packers, I think that one's going to be pretty obvious at this point. And I'm a noted Eagles hater, but this team's a little bit different when they don't have Nick Sirianni calling the shots. He's really just a figurehead on the team at this point. So that's been very helpful to the success of the Eagles. So I've got the Lions against the Rams and the Eagles against the Bucks and the Chiefs against the Chargers and Bills against the Ravens heading into the divisional round. Mark, you're up.
All right. So the first one we're going to start with is I got the Steelers beating the Ravens. I think it's going to be a low-scoring, hard-fought game. And when in doubt, bet against Lamar in the playoffs. He chokes.
All right.
Sucks. He has more interceptions in the playoffs than he does touchdowns. I'm going the Steelers. Next game, I'm not going against Jim Harbaugh in the playoffs against a lowly Texans team that hasn't looked right in a few weeks. So give me Jim Harbaugh to pound the rock and win a very close, like probably 2-3 point game. The Bills versus Broncos. I'm excited to watch this game. I think it's going to be a good game, but I think ultimately towards the end of the game, the Bills just end up pulling away and beat the Broncos. So we have the Chiefs versus the Steelers and the Bills versus the Chargers in the divisional round. NFC is going to get a little crazy here. All right. So obviously the Rams are going to beat the Vikings. We know that. Then I got the Packers upsetting the Eagles. Jalen Hurts is still in concussion protocol. Nick Sirianni's not a good coach. If they can find a way to limit Saquon Barkley, they have a decent enough offensive line to stop that front and run the ball and possibly pull out a victory. And then I have the Commanders over the Buccaneers, and this one actually hurts me because I love Baker Mayfield, but I just think if you look at it, the Bucs needed one win to get in the playoffs, right? They had it week 17 against Carolina. It was Carolina, right? They couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
They lost. And then they had the Saints, and the first half looked like they were going to lose that game too. They're struggling right now. And they find a way to put up a lot of points, but they're really struggling against teams they should be beating handily before the playoffs, especially with a playoff spot on the line. So I think Jaden Daniels is going to get it done on his feet. I think he's going to have probably like 80, 90 yards rushing, and I think that's ultimately going to be the decider in that game.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's the only way the Bucs make it happen is if they can somehow contain Jaden Daniels.
Mm-hmm. So are we going further? Did you just go divisional or?
Actually, yeah, no, I just went with the wild card round, but Zeus here, I mentioned in the comments here, just shoot us an email. It's toiletsandtitles@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. Let us know how to contact you, and I can give you my phone number that way. Maybe we can work something out. But I do currently have a media guy, so I'd have to loop him in to the call, but we can figure all that out later if we need to. Here's a game for you all. Pick one player that will have the highest scoring run for the playoffs. So for the entirety of the playoffs. So here's why I like these games in the NFL playoffs is because you got teams like the Chiefs and the Lions that are on bye. Can't really go with Gibbs if he's going to be on bye unless you think they're going to make it to the Super Bowl and still make up for that extra game. So if you're just choosing one player, man, I love the cut of his jibs. I really do. I really do. That might be my fantasy team name next year if I can get Gibbs in the first round.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're telling me one player without position, it's Josh Allen playing in the wild card round. I see them going to the AFC Championship at the very least. So that would be my guy.
See, for me, it would be if that's the case, I might even consider Lamar because I have not to spoil what we're about to talk about, but I've got the Ravens in the Super Bowl, so he's got the wild card game and he's going to have the Super Bowl in my mind. So, so I guess it would be Lamar. But I was just kind of thinking explosion. I was thinking, the different types of playoff fantasy games that you play. Like you're going to be talking strategies here in a little bit if we have time. So like different things like that. Like I guess it really kind of depends on where you're going with it. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the divisional round. I've got the Chargers with the upset over the Chiefs. That's right, I said it. The Chiefs have won a huge, vast majority of their games by less than one score. So they've won a lot of games, but a lot of them have been close. And I feel like the Chargers are getting hot at the right time, and they've kept the games close with the Chiefs so far this season. So I'm feeling pretty good about the possibility of the Chiefs failing before they even make it to the AFC Championship game, no matter who they play in the divisional round. And in this scenario, with my predictions, it happens to be the Chargers. So I'm going to roll with it. I've got the Chargers beating the Chiefs and making it to the AFC Championship game against the other hardball coach, the Baltimore Ravens. I feel like are going to upset the Bills. So I've got two AFC upsets in the divisional round to make it to a hardball bowl again, only this time for the AFC Championship game. So, yeah, pretty interesting there. I'm sure there aren't a whole lot of people that have the 5-seed Chargers making it to the AFC Championship with how powerful the AFC teams are. But yeah, here I am. And then I have the Lions beating the Rams. I know that's not something that you want to hear, but they have to play each other eventually in my mind, because I do think that they're probably the two best teams in the NFC right now. That's right, I said it. I think that the Rams are better than the Eagles. I think these are the two best teams in the NFC right now, but because of the way their seeds fall, they have to play each other in the divisional round. The Lions win that game. I think it's going to be a good, close game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. It's going to be fun to watch, but the Lions pull it out in the end, mostly just because this is the Lions' year. It has to be the Lions' year for them to finally make it to the Super Bowl. And then the Eagles, I've got the Eagles beating the Bucks pretty handedly in the NFC divisional round as well. So that leaves me with the Chargers against the Ravens and the Lions against the Eagles. What about your divisional round?
Okay, so my AFC is pretty chalky. I got the Chiefs beating the Steelers. We saw a preview of that on what was it, Christmas Day?
Yeah,
Whenever it was.
yeah,
I
I think so.
I don't see much changing in that game. And then I have the Bills beating the Chargers. So I got a Chiefs Bills matchup. I think that's what a lot of people are hoping to see in the AFC Championship.
Well, I don't know about hoping, but
yeah, I
I'm
mean,
not hoping. I don't want to see the Chiefs in it
I mean,
again.
a lot of people want Chiefs out, but I think if you're talking from a pure matchup standpoint of what matchup would you like to see the most, I think a lot of people would say Bills Chiefs.
Hardball Bowl.
There you go. So what do I have here? I have the Lions versus the Packers. I have the Lions winning that game. I think the Packers will be worn out from winning against Philly. That was their miracle shot, and then the Lions will make pretty easy work of them. The Rams, another home game because of how the games fell. I have us beating the Commanders, so that gives us the Lions versus the Rams Week 1 rematch for the NFC Championship.
Very good. Hey, before I move on, hashtag not a sponsor, but what I'm drinking tonight is this is called Starlight by Huber's. It's an Indiana brewery distillery, not brewery. Indiana distillery. It's a rye whiskey, but I got it in Louisville because my wife and I went on a little bit of a weekend vacation this past weekend, and I've driven by this distillery probably 4 dozen times in my life, and I've always wanted to stop at this distillery and never had the time, or never really took the time, or it was like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when they were closed, all that sort of stuff. Like, there was never just good timing for me to stop. And the sign on the front door said, House of Bourbon. So I've always wanted to stop at the House of Bourbon, right? So we go on this vacation, and we're like 20 minutes north of Louisville, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to finally go to that place. And I did. I get there. I walk up to the door. It's not just called the House of Bourbon. You can't see it from the road, but above that it says Justin's. So the name of the place is Justin's House of Bourbon, and I got to tell you, the guys there made me feel like I was right at home, like it was my place. So shout out to Justin's House of Bourbon in Louisville, Kentucky. If any of you are in that area, you stop in, say hi to the guys, tell them that Justin from Toilets and Titles sent you in, and I'm not saying that this is going to do anything for you because, like I said, hashtag not a sponsor, but at least tell them I sent you, because I plan on stopping by there again in the future, and I want to be able to say, hey, I sent you some guys, hook me up, maybe some free samples. I don't know. But so there's that. Wanted to throw that out. We still got Rich's comment up there forever. We do love you, Rich, but not that much. But yeah, he's taking Gibbs. He likes the cut of his Gibbs as well. Plus Gibbs for Super Bowl MVP. Well, let's move on to our predictions. We might have that same thing. I have, in the AFC Championship game, I've got the Ravens beating the Chiefs. Or I'm sorry, the Ravens beating the Chargers. I was looking at your thing at the same time, but I've got the Ravens beating the Chargers in the AFC Championship game. Unfortunately for older Harbaugh brother, it's going to be another pretty easy win for the Ravens. And then I've got the Lions beating the Eagles, and I think that one's actually not going to be very close. I think at the end of the day, the Eagles will eventually choke like the Eagles do, and the Lions are going to prevail and finally make it to that coveted Super Bowl. So I've got the Ravens against the Lions in the Super Bowl, and I'll just go ahead and say I've got the Ravens winning at 31-27. I slapped the score on there too. As much as I'm going to be rooting for the Lions, and I hope the Lions win, I just think this is the Ravens' year. They look too good. They've played too well. And say what you want about Lamar choking in the playoffs, but I just feel like this feels like it's a different year. This is the first time I've ever been fully on board with Lamar into the playoffs and thought this was the year. It just feels different this time. And I'm sure other people have said that in the past when he choked. So take it for what it's worth. But for me, this is Lamar's season. The Lions will have it again next year. So 31-27 Ravens.
All right. Well, Chiefs-Bills, the game we've been waiting for. The Bills get it done. Finally, their year. They finally beat the Chiefs. Josh Allen.
I'd be okay with that.
Josh Allen plays out of his mind and leads them to a victory, and Buffalo is going back to the Super Bowl. And who are they going to play? They're going to play the Rams. The Rams are beating the Lions in the NFC Championship. Dan Campbell is going to go for fourth down one too many times, and we're going to come up with the big stop that seals it and sends the Rams back to the Super Bowl behind a young defensive team. So who wins?
All right.
Who wins the Super Bowl? Bills or Rams?
Oh, well, I wonder.
We know what the Bills stands for. Boy, I love losing Super Bowls. So the Rams are Super Bowl champions again.
Oh, wow. Enjoy it while it lasts, folks. You Rams fans, enjoy it while it fictionally lasts in your head.
Yeah. And when we get to my best bets, you're going to be like, well, with what you picked, that makes zero sense. All right. Well, money is a different thing. When you're putting money on the line, we'll be a little more realistic. But
see, Rich types this in, but realistically, secretly, he's just waiting for season 2025 to open up in Vegas so he can go drop his money on the Raiders for the Super Bowl next year.
Rich already bet the Super Bowl this year. He had Aiden O'Connell as the NFL MVP. You know, he didn't even get to start this.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
We will get Nate's predictions at some point this week. I'll have him log in and get that up there for us so that we have it for the future episodes. But you've got some playoff bets here that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
What do you got?
So we'll start with some Super Bowl winners. When I'm looking at winners, I'm looking for value, and like you may think a team's going to win the Super Bowl, but like Detroit, for example, to win the Super Bowl, they're only plus 320. For them, I don't think that's high enough. I don't think that's good value. So I'm not betting them. I think the Chiefs at 370 being back-to-back champions, that's good value for them. Because last year when the playoffs started, I think they were probably at like plus 200. So I think we're getting better value for them this year. And then the two I like the most are probably the Bills at plus 600 and the Eagles at plus 650. I just think for both those teams, the way they played this year, getting a plus 600 figure is kind of crazy compared to everybody else. So I like those two the most. And then, of course, I'm betting my Rams at plus 3,500.
Where did the Ravens fall?
The Ravens were at plus 550. So, I mean, if you like the Ravens, that's a decent value. But like I told you, I will never bet on Lamar. I have a bet I have a bet with a buddy that Lamar will never win a Super Bowl in his career.
You will never bet on Lamar during the postseason, right?
Yeah, my bet is that Lamar will never win a Super Bowl.
Right, because
I've always said he's one of the greatest fantasy football quarterbacks for a regular season that you can get. Right.
I was going to say I have more than a few fantasy football championships because of Lamar. 100%. Let's see. What about the conference winners now? So line up those conference winners for us.
Yeah, so conference winners, I stayed away from the AFC completely. Again, it's all value based. Chiefs are at plus 155 and Buffalo's at plus 250. I mean, I'd rather just bet them game to game than
again. Ravens
are at plus 280. So not that great either.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the Chargers going to the AFC Championship. So like if you like them to go that far at plus 1,200, that's a good bet because they only have to win one game you don't expect them to. So I mean,
right, but I really don't expect them to. This is why I don't like this kind of betting because you have to bet on teams or guys that you really don't believe in just because you like the value, and that doesn't make sense to me. So that's why I've never been able to get into this type of betting.
I mean, it's value based on their winning chance. So like, out of the NFC, like I like the Lions, the Eagles, and the Rams. Those are the three teams I like. The Lions don't have value, so I'm not betting them. I'm betting the Rams and I'm betting the Eagles. The same with the AFC. I like the Bills and the Chiefs. They both have decent value for me. I'm not just betting the Broncos because they're plus 5,000. That I'm not doing that.
Now, you've got a few other bets down here, and on those bets, what I did was off to the right in my section. I did what I would bet with those bets because I didn't go in and look up a bunch of new prop bets or anything. So,
gotcha. So, wild card prop, right back with the theme. Lamar Jackson interception, yes, plus 120.
All right. So, what is no on that?
No was I think minus 114.
So again, for those of us that need to be told like we're kindergartners, what does that mean? Because I would have said no.
So the easiest way to look at it is to win $100, that's what you have to bet when it's negative. So if you bet $114, you'll win $100. So you would get your 114 back plus an extra 100.
Right. So if I only bet $5, I'm only winning like 480 or something like that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Because Vegas even knows that there's a better chance that he won't than that he will.
Barely. It's plus 120. What the plus means is if I bet 100, I would win 120. So you win that a little bit extra. So, yeah. I think it's a given against the Steelers. We'll see what happens.
Now, this next bet, I think this one's obvious.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the way he's played, it's not. I mean, Cooper Kupp's been awful over the last 4 weeks. He's not getting.
And I've had a theory on that because we've got Sean McVay as the head coach for the Rams.
Oh yeah,
I think that Cooper Kupp has more catches and more yards and definitely more touchdowns than Puka in this next game. I think they've been doing this by design. They've been setting this up. They want Puka to be the number one guy. They want Puka to be the number one covered guy. And then when it's time for it to count, this first playoff game at least, they're going to sneak around and they're going to go back to the guy that just won the Triple Crown a couple years ago in Cooper Kupp because he is more than serviceable. So I think this is like a sneaky play. And even if it's not, even if I'm wrong and he doesn't have 120 receiving yards like I think he will, he can have a regular average everyday Cooper Kupp game for this season and still be really damn close to that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, it's way too low. It's 100% recency bias. And on top of that, like on top of everything you just said, the other point is the defenses are going to scheme to try to shut Puka down.
Yeah.
So if they're scheming
and they should
Puka down, then that's going to leave more for Cooper. So I just think 44.5 is a slam dunk easy bet there at minus 120.
Yeah.
And then my final bet that I like is Jaden Daniels over 48.5 rushing yards. I mean, I'm probably going to even tease it higher to get better odds because, as we were talking earlier, I think he has 80 to 90 rushing yards in that game against the Bucs. So I think
so bump it up to about 60.5 or 62.5.
Yeah.
Try to get some better payout that way. Makes sense. Because I mean, I also think it's going to be over. And just like we said earlier, I think that the Buccaneers' only chance is to contain Jaden Daniels. And while I think he'll get more than 50 yards, I still think that they can hold him enough to possibly win the game. But I mean, you can only contain Jaden Daniels so much, and that it's not like that Tampa Bay defense is one to be scared of. So I agree with that one completely.
Mm-hmm. And then we moved down. I had a couple spread bets. Steelers 9.5 just seems absolutely insane to me. I'm not going to bet the money line. I think the Steelers have a good shot of beating the Ravens, but I don't think there's a prayer that the Ravens blow the Steelers out like they did in that last game, especially in a playoff game with that Steeler defense. Tomlin's going to scheme things to make sure it's a low-scoring game, and I think 9.5 is an easy cover.
I actually meant to change what I put on this one because earlier in the day when I was busy doing lesson plans and stuff like that, like I was kind of busy and I put that the Steelers would cover the 9.5 because in my mind, 9.5 points is a lot of points. But as the days gone by and I've had more time to actually think about the NFL a little bit more, like I just again, I'm a huge believer that this is Lamar's year and this is the Baltimore Ravens year to get this done. I think it's going to be 2 scores pretty easily. So if I think it's easily going to be 2 scores, I got to believe that the Ravens will win by more than 9.5. So I think I would probably take the Ravens on that one. What's the Ravens odds on that one? If the Steelers are at minus 105, what's the odds if I take the Ravens if the Steelers are plus 9.5 and their odds are negative 105, then what are the odds for the Ravens if I take the negative 9.5?
115. Usually on spreads, they're like identical. It's
gotcha.
Minus 115, just a little worse than the 105.
Gotcha. All right, and the next
one was Chargers minus 2.5. I really don't see a way the Texans win this game, if I'm being honest. And I think it'll easily be by a field goal or more. So I just think that's a lock.
So I worded it differently, but I was thinking the same thing. Chargers going to win by more than 2.5. So,
Yep.
so we were on the same track there. Pittsburgh, Baltimore. The under and over on this game is 43.5.
Yes. So I took the under. Like I said, I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I don't think they sniff close to 43. I think at halftime you're going to see that over under drop to about 25.
Ooh, wow. So I went back and looked at the last two matches from earlier this season, and one of the games were like closer to that 25 points total, and the other one was closer to about 55 points total. So
Yeah.
what was different in that game? Like why did they score so many more later on in the season for you to think that all of a sudden it's going to go back to the 25 that it was about midway through the season?
I think it was the Steelers were on the road, which they're going to be, but I think that was a game where they just got down early and they kind of gave up. I think playoff atmosphere is a totally different game. Like I said, I don't think Lamar plays good in a playoff atmosphere, and I think the Steelers are going to do enough scheme wise to
That's right.
rattle him and have a couple turnovers. And we know the Steelers haven't been scoring a lot of points, so I just think it's going to be a very low scoring field goal kind of game. And we've seen how bad Justin Tucker has been.
Well, that's right, and you've been Mr. Consistency tonight because I kind of forgot about that. You have said several times that Lamar isn't going to play well in the playoffs. If you believe that, then obviously you're going to go the under here. I took the over because I'm believing the other way. So let's see, Buffalo and Denver. The over under on that one is 47.5.
I think they crush this over. I think it's in the 60s at I do think Buffalo may win by 2 scores, but I think the first half, maybe first 3 quarters, are going to be just back and forth offenses duking it out. And then I just think Buffalo takes away at the end of the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've got the over on that too. Is this another one of those games where you're going to play with fate a little bit and bump up the tease up the numbers a little bit, as you said earlier?
Not on over-unders. I'm scared to death to do that because every time you think an over-under is going to go crazy or go opposite of what it is, it's usually within 1 point of what Vegas has. They're just so crazy good with the over-unders. So I typically don't play with that. I play with that more on yardage props.
Gotcha. All right. I want to give a shout out now. I want to give a little bit of congratulations here to our man Batulak. I'm not sure how he came up with that name, but I did a Google search, and the only thing I can find there is all of his social medias. So this is obviously his thing. This isn't something he created from something different. Like Batulak is his I don't know, his alter ego, but he was the Predator in the Frankensteak. He had an 11-2 season, so he was, I believe, the number 2 seed throughout the Frank playoffs. He made it to the Frank championship. He ended up playing my son, who was like the 11 or 12 seed, I believe. And my son barely won each of his matchups. Well, I guess he blew out the first matchup because he got a second round bye, and then he barely won the next 2 matchups. And then it came down to Monday night. Jahmyr Gibbs has a monster game for Predator to come back and win that game on the last series. It was a very close game, but in Frankensteak, the scoring is outrageous. We know this. But Jahmyr Gibbs scored 97.05 points in Frankensteak. And that 97 points was just enough to put him over the top of Peyton, my son, who was the Hounds of Bakersville, to win the Frankensteak championship. So kudos to you, Batulak. The payouts have all been done. The charitable donation that he decided that he wanted to give, and I'm tired of saying Batulak. I want to say his real name, but I need to find it real quick. Let's see. Predator, Batulak. James Gilmer. So James, the the charity that James decided he wanted to give to was the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Many of you know that it's NAMI. It's a very predominant foundation to help with mental illness. And I did a Google search. They're one of the best charities out there as far as how much of the dollar actually gets donated to the charity, and they are well over 65% of every penny on the dollar that actually goes to help somebody for the charity, which is actually a really high percentage for charities like this, believe it or not. So kudos to you. Obviously, you wouldn't choose that as your the thing that you want to send your donation to if you didn't at least know somebody that battles mental illness, or if you didn't yourself. So we appreciate you looking out for people with mental illness as well. It's one of the most proud moments as one of the founders of Toyless Titles, to be able to know that we created this league and we were able to donate a total of $650 that all of you in Frankenstink this year helped to contribute to, because $5 of your buy-in automatically goes, one-third of your buy-in actually, so I guess it'd be $10. $10 of your buy-in automatically goes to a charity of the winner's choice. And that's what he chose. So congratulations on a great win. We're excited to see you back next year. He claims he's going to come back and win it. He's going to run it back and win it a second time. In years past, the champion comes back, they don't even make the playoffs. So we'll see how that works out for you. My son he was just fine with losing because he's a huge Lions fan, and he lost because Gibbs sealed the deal for the number 1 seed for his Lions. So he was perfectly fine with it. He knew he was running on borrowed time the last couple of weeks anyway. It was a well-deserved victory. You played a great season all year. So congratulations to you. And I'm going to start working on the new Frank season really soon. We've already worked out some new monster cards. Mark has sat down with me. Rich sat down with me last week. We've gone through a lot of these monster cards already. We're going to go through the rest of them. We're going to have a rules meeting for the other rules. But I'm already going to start reaching out to people probably within the next couple of weeks to start getting guys and gals that were in this year's Frank that want to commit to next year's Frank already and start getting these divisions set up early. So I want to get the league safe set up early. I want to get people in and paid early so that I don't have to pay a ton of extra buy-ins like I did last year. So that really kind of stunk. But that was on me. I was new to the money side. Coach always handled the money end, and now I have a newfound respect for him on that end. But we wanted to give that shout out because the Frankenstink is our signature league of Toyless Titles. So but yeah, it was a fun and incredible league, and look for new crazy things to come this up and coming season when Mark is actually going to be competitive with us.
What I wanted to say was this season hurt even more, not because of how bad my team was, but last year I was competitive and my team was the Predator, the Wolf Predator, and he flamed out just like in the movie and died. And then James must have had the Super Predator and wins the very next season with a Predator. That hurt my soul.
Well, I mean, if you come back now, you'll just have to come back with the new name, the Ghostface, because that, for one, that was a very creative name. It was a nice play on the movie itself, but also it's Ghostface, man. Like, Ghostface has to be better represented than what you gave it.
I don't think I was ready for the whole Canton live draft thing. I mean, our division was a super division. You guys were on point. Like, we were ready to go. And
yeah. So we're actually the third highest scoring division, believe it or not. Out of all the divisions, we were only the third highest scoring division. My wife did a whole spreadsheet for me after we had that conversation about finding that payout. Because she started trying to figure out some information here. I've got it somewhere, I thought, but now obviously I can't find it. But
I'll tell you what, my whole season last season was determined by 10 points. I truly believe that, because in the very first week, I won by 10 points, and I decided I was going to decide whether to tank for a hero or just win straight out based on that first week, and I won by 10 points. So I tried to win in week 2, and I got demolished, and I lost every week since then. If I would have just lost that first week and got that hero, I think it would have been a whole nother story. Needless to say, what my strategy is going to be next year, if the rules are the same.
Most of the rules are going to be the same. There's going to be a few quirks here and there that are a little bit different, but for the most part, we're gonna keep it the same. Up to you. We are well past an hour. We're almost an hour and a half here. I'll leave it up to you if you want to talk about the playoff pool strategies and tips. That's not something that I do. So if you want to talk about it, I'll just let you take the floor.
Yeah, I can do it real quick. I think it's worth mentioning because a lot of the guys will still watching are most likely going to be doing some kind of fantasy playoff pool. So you got 3 different kinds of pools that you typically do. You got your one and done. You got a roster that's for the entire playoffs, and you have regular draft. Your one and done is usually a standard fantasy roster that you fill each round of the playoffs, like quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, that kind of thing. But once you pick a player, you can't use them again. So you have 2 different thought processes here in going as far as strategy. Do you draft the top players who have the best matchup each week, or are you drafting the best players on teams you believe that are going to lose? I tend to lean towards teams that you believe are going to lose, just because you don't want to end up in a position where you're running out of players later on in the playoffs. I think one of the best things to do is determine who you think is going to make the Super Bowl before you even start your contest, and do your best to try and save a lot of these players. Because I think a key in most all of these playoff strategies is being one of the teams that has the most players in that final game. Because that's where you're really going to make a move on the field. So if you can save a good chunk of those players for that final game, I think you'll find yourself in a very good position. The other contest roster for your entire playoffs, sometimes they even have a little tweak where it's 1 player per team. This is pretty much the same as before. You're usually using a standard fantasy roster, but you fill it out before the playoffs even start, and that's your team for the entire length of the playoffs. I'm in one of these pools. We have a rule where you can only pick 1 player per team. So, like, you got to decide, do you want Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley? You can't have them both. Do you want Patrick Mahomes? Do you want Travis Kelce? You got to make those decisions. The best way I like to do these kind of pools is print out a playoff bracket before and fill it all the way right out to the Super Bowl. And once you did that, write each team along the side and count up how many games each team is playing. So now you know you have this team playing 3 games. This team's only playing 1. This team's playing 2. And you can kind of decide from there where you want your players to come from based on that. Another strategy I like to use in that format is I like to, again, choose who my Super Bowl teams are going to be. And I like to have my quarterback on one of those 2 teams. Your other one is just your regular draft. This is going to be pretty much standard to all your other fantasy football drafts. And most likely the players are going to go pretty similar to how you would think they would during the regular season based on their fantasy ranking. What I like to do is, with your first pick, grab the best available player that's playing in wild card weekend and it's got to be on a team you're most confident is going to win. So, like, for example, if you think for sure the Eagles are going to beat the Packers, then I want to target either Saquon Barkley or Jalen Hurts or AJ Brown with my first pick. And then as the draft goes on, you want to try to get combos of quarterbacks and receivers if you can. If you can pair your receiver with a quarterback, that's going to be big for points wise going throughout the playoffs. And then you also want, again, determine who your Super Bowl teams are going to be, and then try to gather as many of those players later on in the draft as you can, just because, like I said, for all these pools, usually the team who has the most players in that game is going to squeak out a win. That's all I got. Any thoughts?
No, I mean, I've played in a few of these in the past, and I mean, they're a lot of fun. I really wish that we were able to get something together with T to T this year. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time right now. I'm still trying to study for my praxis exams, and I've got a whole new semester coming up, a second semester where I've got lesson plans to put together. And fortunately, today and tomorrow, snow days. Hey, there's one bonus to being a school teacher. It's kind of like a construction worker praying for rain on his way into work. But yeah, so I've got that going for me. So tomorrow I'll be able to study a little more for that praxis test. But yeah, unfortunately we got a lot going on right now. And the coach is the guy that usually handled all those sorts of things, and nobody else on the team really has the reach of different people like he has to be able to get those things filled as quickly as he does. Coach does have a Super Bowl bracket that he's got going on right now. So for those of you that didn't know about that, I thought that I had shared. Did I not share that on? I think I did share that in our Discord.
You did.
And we should have a Super Bowl squares going pretty soon as well. That is something that's a little bit easier to do. The hard part is getting the payment for it. So I'm going to do it like Coach does, and you don't get the square until you pay for it, sort of thing. So we'll have at least a Super Bowl square for Toilets and Titles. But in the meantime, help Coach fill out his, I think it's $15. $5 of it goes towards his kids' soccer program. So going for a good cause there, help them kids out, and then try to win you some money on the side too. So you can reach out to him on Twitter. That's at Coach Sheps. Or I can give you his phone number if you want to text him directly to make sure he already gave me permission. I can give his phone number out to random strangers because he's just cool like that, I guess. So he can do it that way as well, but he's got a Venmo set up for it and all that. But so yeah, we'll go from there, and we'll try to get together our own Super Bowl squares. Our last couple segments here, I'm not going to do today because we're like way over time. But that was the one and done eliminator game. We will review that next week before we get started with the bathroom board bets, and then also our divisional round draft update. We have an update on that for those of you that don't remember. We did a divisional round where we only drafted AFC NFC North and AFC NFC South the next week, AFC NFC East, AFC NFC West. Like we did each of those in 4 different drafts. Mark, Nate, and I, we're going to reveal the results of that next week as well. So we will do both of those before we jump into the bathroom board bets next week. But for now, an hour and a half is way too long. There's no reason why you guys should still be watching this. We greatly appreciate you for doing so, but you're insane. Mark, what do you got, buddy?
2 things. Wanted to give a shout out to Ice for winning the staff league, our T2T staff league.
Yeah, there you go.
Getting a Saquon Barkley autographed mini helmet, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, so I need to work on that. I need to get that done, but I was kind of hoping that one of the guys might have the ability to get a little bit of a discounted rate for us, but I think I might just go buy one outright and then we'll just split it up.
$20 a person. We pay more than that for most leagues anyway. So
yeah, I don't want to make the man wait too long. So
yeah. And then the other thing I almost forgot, my Survivor League, I ended up winning, split with one other person. The final week came down to 4 people. We had to pick 2 teams for the final week. I went with the Broncos, which was easy, and then the Commanders, which looked like a loss until they benched Jaden Daniels and put Mariota.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, that was a pretty good payout, 2-person split. So yeah, that was fun. The other
nice.
The 2 guys who lost, one lost. They had the Vikings, which I thought was a little risky pick there. But I mean, it's week 18. You're probably down. You don't have a lot of options to choose from. And then the other guy had to be kicking and screaming because he had the Packers who lost on that last second field goal.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're gonna wait until the last week and play it on a divisional opponent, it's kind of on you, right? Like you should have saw that one coming.
Yeah. I almost won it all though, because every one of them had the Buccaneers as one of their picks. So at halftime, I was like, "Oh, this is looking good."
Man, never count out on Baker whenever it's time to go.
And did you see that? Sorry to keep this going, but did you see that stupid penalty they gave that guy McMillan for the first down signal where he went like this? He did a first down.
Oh, I did not see it this week, but I saw them do it a few weeks back, probably like week 14 or so. They did that to a wide receiver that did that. I mean, it is what it is. Like it's a dumb penalty, but they know that it's going to be a penalty when they do it. So
he caught an amazing catch for the go-ahead score in that game, so he redeemed himself.
Yeah. All right, man. I'm gonna close this out. But for Mark, I'm Justin. Again, it's patreon.com/toiletstitles. Reach out to us on X at toiletstitles or at JustinFF_ or at MT Simon or at Nate_Dirt19. Or you can reach us right here. I've got it written down right here at Blue Sky, at toiletstitles on Blue Sky. And like I said, next week's show is going to be a fun one. We might talk a little bit about the playoffs as well, but for right now, the big plan is the bathroom board bets because we're all about ripping on each other here and bragging rights and such. So you all have a great night. Enjoy the fantasy or the NFL playoffs, and thanks for tuning in.
Whose house?